Rabbi Litvin from Lexington. One of the few, I think, two rabbis born in the Commonwealth, comes back from the Louisville area, is now working as the director of the Chabad of the Bluegrass, working part of a larger Jewish organization, actually the largest worldwide Jewish organization, runs the Chabad for the Jewish Center at the University of Kentucky, a very busy leader in our state. He has a particular passion for Project Friendship, which provides clothing and accessories to persons of low income. They're hoping to distribute $5 million of apparel this year. He's also a chaplain with the Kentucky General Assembly, volunteers as a religious guide for inmates and hospital patients. But also in just all of his spare time, he is a father and husband, and has five young children, which to me is just already a superpower. And so we're very excited to have you with us today and sharing. And we just really appreciate your time, especially as this month is such a busy time with the high holy days. So we just take these 45 minutes or so as a real value and gift. So my brother, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. As of today, I have 3 4-year-olds. My oldest 3 are 10 months apart, and today is my twin's birthday. So I have 3 4-year-olds right now. If anyone here can wrap their minds around that, let me know how. Because anyway, so welcome. Thank you, Rob, for that great introduction. As he mentioned, this is the busiest month of the Jewish calendar, especially for a rabbi. My mom always warned me if I became a rabbi, I never get to take the Jewish holidays off. So, yeah, that's where I am. So we just finished the Days of Awe. The Days of Awe were Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Now, interestingly, 3 holidays get called holidays in the Torah. So in the Jewish religion, there are 3 major holidays. Those are Sukkot, which we're going to talk about today, Passover, Pesach, and the Feast of Weeks, or Shavuos. In addition to that, 2 other days get mentioned as holy days. So holiday and holy day gets kind of combined in English. And the holy days are Rosh Hashanah, which is the head of the year, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Awe. If you're biblically familiar, Moses came down after 40 days on Sinai and saw the golden calf, went back up to Sinai for 40 days, came back down and told the Jews they were forgiven, went back up for 40 days, and as proof they were forgiven, brought a second tablet. So that's Yom Kippur, which was yesterday. So I was leading services in a tent yesterday as it was raining, which was a lot of fun. And just in time for the rainy season, we have Sukkot. Sukkot is one of the 3 pilgrimage holidays. Jews from all over the land of Israel, and even from outside the land of Israel, would travel to Jerusalem for the holiday. One of the 10 recognized miracles of the temple is that everyone was able to find room to stay in Jerusalem for the 3 pilgrimage holidays. That's how many people were there, that it was a miracle there was room. And Sukkot is possibly the happiest of the 3. Passover recognizes our exodus from Egypt. Shavuos recognizes 49 days later, the initial arrival at Sinai. But Sukkot recognizes God's love. It's in remembrance of the 40 years in the desert. Generally, the desert is a very inhospitable place. Desert is somewhere where it's hard to live. And God cared for the children of Israel in the 40 years it took to get from Egypt to the land of Israel. So those 40 years are what we're celebrating by building tabernacles. Now there's a myriad of laws of what that tabernacle has to be. It has to be strong enough that it won't fall down on the holiday, but it can't be a permanent structure. So there's some things that are out, some things that are in. The Talmud goes into very deep conversations, what's considered permanent. Technically, one of the walls can be a camel or an elephant, as long as its legs are tied together so it won't stand up in the middle of the holiday. So every single avenue of what it can be. If anyone's a fan of the Lee and Haley show, they're going to be joining me this Wednesday to build my tabernacle with me. So if one rabbi who did not cover construction rabbinical school is not enough of a joke trying to build a tabernacle, I'm going to have backup this year. The holiday is called Zman Simchasenu, the time of our joy. And in the temple era, it was accompanied by a phenomenal ceremony, the ceremony of the water, Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the joy of bringing the water. The rabbis at the time said that any person who has not witnessed this ceremony in the temple has never seen actual joy in their entire lives. The most famous leaders of the generation, the equivalent of congressmen and Supreme Court justices, would juggle knives and balance fire on their head, do cartwheels, all sorts of things just to bring joy to the population. They would have, I don't like the word copious for this, but large amounts of wine would flow throughout Jerusalem, and you could see the party in Jerusalem from the hills surrounding the city. So the central observances of Sukkot are three. There's the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the joy factor. There's the tabernacle factor, and there's the collecting the four species. Now the four species are lulav, esrog, hadas, and arava, or in English, a palm branch, a myrtle branch, a willow branch, and a citron. I'm not talking about the European car. A citron is a lemon-looking, lemon-tasting, lemon-smelling fruit that costs between $90 and $350, $400. It's the most expensive lemon you'll ever buy. Interestingly, the day the holiday's over, it's worth 65 cents, just like a lemon. However, it's the only article in the Torah, the only mitzvah that God says, take a beautiful fruit. So there are many who want to lock in and get the nicest one possible. Sort of like when you're looking at wedding rings, every rabbi who comes has to reject the first 2 or 3 out of hand to show that he's an expert in knowing what he's looking for. No dark marks, a perfect shape. And so the citron grows best in Calabria and Italy. So Italian esrog is like the Rolls Royce of esrogim. Mine will come from Italy, and that's the one that I'll share with the community. This year I have a whole new procedure on how to transfer a lulav from one person to another in the age of COVID. We're also building the sukkah 2 times larger than it's ever been before to enable the same amount of people to use the sukkah. So the Jewish Student Center provides the sukkah free access for all the students at UK. However, just more space is needed for social distancing. So we're building the sukkah twice as large as it was in previous years. Now, both the sukkah and the 4 species are along the same theme, and they tie very much into the joy theme. The 4 species are separated in many different ways. Willow, willow branch leaves look like lips. If anyone can picture a willow leaf. A myrtle leaf looks like eyelids, a closed eye. The palm branch, which is a strong, thick branch, looks like a spine. And if you cut open the citron, it has 4 sections inside, and it looks a bit like an actual human. It doesn't look like the heart shape that we know in our society, but it looks quite a bit like an actual heart. In addition, a palm branch gives off dates, but a palm branch has no smell that we associate with dates. I'm not exactly sure what dates smell like. A myrtle branch has a very positive smell, but it doesn't taste like anything. A willow branch doesn't give off a scent and doesn't have a flavor, and a citron both gives off a nice, strong, lemony flavor as well as taste. So it's compared to our 4 kinds of people in our society. One that's a taste he gives to others. A taste is something, if you taste good, you don't know it. A cannibal would know it, you wouldn't know it. So a taste is something that someone else benefits from. A smell is something you benefit from. So a smell is compared to being studious, being learned, being wise, and a taste is being kind. So a lulav is compared to one who is kind to others but doesn't learn himself, is not a learned person. A willow is compared to someone who neither gives to others nor gives to themselves in learning. A myrtle is compared to someone who's rather learned themselves but doesn't give to others, and a citron is compared to a person who both gives to others and gives to themselves through improving themselves. The remarkable thing is, though, that if you want to have the 4 species command, you need all 4 species. You'd think that, for example, willow branches, which don't give and don't benefit, were out of season, I could replace them. But the Torah specifically says all 4 need to be brought together. There's a theory in our society, if we bring the best and brightest together, we can remake society. The fact is, it's not true. If you want to improve society, you need to include everyone. You need to have a joint effort to make something happen. In addition, the sukkah, now in a normal year, one of the joys of a sukkah is that I don't build that big of a sukkah. And I'll have 25 students. Normally when we're inside the house and it's 75 degrees, each student is sitting on their own, probably on their phone, in their own little bubble. In the sukkah, normally, now this year will be a little different, but normally we're all huddled together. It's a little cold, it might be raining, and we're all crowded in a warm environment outside in the elements. So although we won't be crowding together this year, that same camaraderie takes place. I used to have a joke with my siblings growing up in Louisville. Every year of my childhood, it rained at least one night of Sukkot. My mom would always serve soup that night. And the game would be who could finish their soup before the rain fills it back up. So there's a camaraderie that eating in a booth brings. We're doing it together. You can have a meal with someone, you can be in the same room as someone, and there is no camaraderie. When the wind's blowing and the rain's falling and you're outside with someone else participating in this, being in a booth together. A booth is one of the 2 commandments. There's a commandment in the Torah of ritual bathing, of bathing in a ritual bath of more than 40 saw of water, which women who are able to become spiritually pure in today's day and age do once a month. Men who are unable to become spiritually pure in today's day and age technically would have to do it before they went to the temple, as we cannot go to the temple today. Some have the custom to do it occasionally. But the idea of ritual bathing is one of the 2 commandments that your entire body does. You use your hand to give charity. You use your ears to hear the shofar blast. Whatever that commandment is, it's one specific part of the body. But when you bathe, it's your entire body is underwater. And the only other commandment which requires the entire body is entering a sukkah booth. When you enter the booth, your whole body's inside the booth. So both the 4 species and the sukkah itself are unifying activities. It's 100% in. And as we go back to the festival of joy, what brings joy is unity. Unity brings joy. Now, many people will tell you that social distancing means separating. Today, of all times, that's provably not true. We're here speaking together. Looks like a dozen people, all in our own homes or offices, etc. And yet we're together being able to converse. We live in the golden age of being united, even while we're social distancing. So the overarching theme of the holiday is, number 1, recognizing where our help comes from. As David says in the 121st Psalm, I lift my eyes from whence my help comes. So knowing that help comes from God. Today, I live in a stone house. I have a front door with a deadbolt. You'd think that would protect me from harm. In the last month, personally, I had my life threatened by a white supremacist group who was unhappy with a public statement I made about Judaism. 2 weeks ago, a colleague of mine at the University of Delaware had his center burnt to the ground. The fact is that we aren't protected by stone walls. A student of mine asked me if he was in a car accident, is it a miracle he survived? I said, I think any time that I get into 3,000 pounds of steel and move at 90 miles an hour and arrive where I'm supposed to be at the right time safely, that's a minor miracle. There are thousands of miracles in our daily lives. So recognizing that these are miracles, recognizing the hand of God in our own life, that it's not, for example, the car we're in that protects us, because I'm sure all of us have seen something on the side of the road where someone was in a very strong steel box that none of us could break personally, and yet it didn't protect them as it should have. Rather, it's God that's protecting us, God that's watching out for us and protecting us from everything. That's also a unifying thing, that while one of us might be less susceptible to a mugging than someone else, One of us might be stronger than someone else. One of us might carry more firearms than someone else. From physical dangers, we all protect ourselves to the best of our abilities, but those abilities are different. When we recognize that what really protects us from danger, what really protects us from harm, is God. Now, that doesn't mean one doesn't have to take proper precautions. Judaism teaches you're not allowed to rely on a miracle, and there's a commandment in the Torah that says you have to watch out for your health. So, drive safely, don't go somewhere you might get mugged, etc. But realize that all these precautions, and I would note that as we look at a illness which is affecting people all over the world, we've seen the president of Brazil, who has the ability to take any precaution he wants, was diagnosed with COVID. There are major Hollywood stars. The idea, you would think that a disease like this would affect the poorest in society, who don't have now, and it has, and it's something we need to watch out for. But this shows that no matter what benefits you're able to take, you can't always beat the elements around you. So that recognition that the great equalizer is that we're all equal in the eyes of God, we're all brothers and sisters in the eyes of God. And our true deliverance comes from making a vessel, taking the proper precautions, and God filling that vessel with blessing is the overarching message of Sukkot. One of unity, and that unity brings about one of joy. Before I dive into specifics, does anyone have any questions? I don't know how Rob wants to do this. Do you want me to keep going, pause for questions?
What we'll do is we'll just allow, if someone's got a question, they can just put it in the chat room.
Excellent.
We'll
Okay.
let you keep going, and I'll monitor the chat.
Excellent. Oh, what an excellent coffee. Thank God. So, in addition to being the mother of 5 children, running the only kosher catering in central Kentucky, and being an educator at UK, my wife also found time to make me a coffee this morning because she's amazing. So as I mentioned, Sukkot is part of 3 holidays. It's often called in the Torah the 3 holidays, as I mentioned. And while each of them celebrates something specific, Sukkot is celebrating, as we said, the 40 years in a desert and God's protection. Passover, probably the most famous Jewish holiday, if not Hanukkah, celebrates the exodus from Egypt and the various miracles that happened then. And Shavuos celebrates the giving of the Torah, the making of the Jewish people. Depending which rabbi you ask, when Jews became Jews, which we can have a whole other launch on how the word Jews came about. But what's the beginning of the Jewish people? Most rabbis would tell you Sinai is the beginning of the Jewish people. When the Jewish people accepted religious laws upon themselves, they became a people different from the nations that surrounded them, who didn't follow all the various laws of the Torah. I recently went into my neighbor's house to ask him to help me with something, and he quickly covered his frying pan and said, "Don't worry, this isn't bacon." I told him, "Don't worry, you can have bacon. I just can't have bacon." I have no issue with you having bacon, which, by the way, is a very healthy religious perspective to have. I'm going to keep God's laws. It's not necessarily my job to police what everyone else in the world is doing. So in addition to these monumentous occasions that we have, each one of these holidays also recognizes a part of the harvest, specifically in Israel. These dates don't always match up if you're harvesting tobacco in Kentucky, but if you're harvesting in Israel, these are very specific dates. Passover is the first gleaning of crops. Shavuos is the full harvest of grains. And Sukkot is the first fruit. So the initial investment, recognizing its growth, and the collection of that bounty from the earth. So a great deal of Jewish law specifically deals with our relationship with the earth. The term Mother Earth is not a Jewish term. It comes from a idolatrous point of view, so it's not one I normally use. But what we commonly call in society Mother Earth, that concept is a strong one in Judaism. That as the earth does a tremendous amount for us, we owe a debt to the earth. You'll find in the story of Moses that Aaron is the one who brings the first 2 plagues. We call the 10 plagues the plagues of Moses. But actually, it's Aaron that brings the first 2 plagues. Aaron strikes the river, and Aaron strikes the sand. And the rabbis explain Moses felt that he owed something to the river. When his mother had to hide him as a child, she put him in a basket and put him on the river. And in his adult life, when he saw a unjust killing going on, he saw a taskmaster being ready to kill a Jewish slave, he killed the taskmaster and buried him in the sand. That sand enabled him to have time to escape before he would be punished. So it's remarkable the amount of hakaras hatov, appreciation for the good that Moses is displaying here. Certainly neither the sand nor the Nile is a sentient being that in any way intended to help. However, because Moses felt an appreciation to that, he felt an appreciation even towards the river and the sand, shows the extent that Judaism pushes for appreciation for the good. So likewise, the earth, which produces the air we need to breathe, the water we need to drink, the food we need to eat, all of that comes to the earth. I recently saw a banner, if you appreciate farmers, thank a farmer. If you like food, then you appreciate farmers. That one needs to recognize that we owe a tremendous debt to the ground, towards the entire cycle of transferring water, etc. So, excuse me, Sukkot in general is referred to as Chag HaAsif, the festival of ingathering. Modern expression would call Sukkot the harvest festival. Although in Kentucky, harvest festival brings to mind farmer in the dell and pumpkins and whatever. That's not exactly what is being harvested in Israel at this time, but the idea of a harvest festival. It's not only a physical concept because we are bringing in the late food, but it's harvesting from this entire month. I'm sure many of you can relate to, within your academic schedule, having overload periods. So we had the entire month of Elul, the previous month before Rosh Hashanah, is the month of repentance. People go to synagogue more. They're now, again, this is a normal year. There's huge investment. Then you have the 2 days of the high holiday, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. It's days where we look back at the past year and we do what's called a cheshbon nefesh, an accounting of your soul. Looking back at all your actions in the last year, seeing what was positive and what, God forbid, wasn't, and what work we need to do. Then you have the 10 days of serious repentance as we prepare for Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur in Judaism is a day where God decides your fate, if you should live or if you should die. And then we have Yom Kippur itself. We dress all in white. We don't eat or drink. And we spend nearly the entire day in synagogue praying. It'd be very easy after that experience to have a little burnout. I'm done with synagogue for a while. It might be easy to be overloaded and gain very little from that because there was just so much going on. So instead of backing down a little bit, Judaism throws in a third holiday. They throw in the holiday of the ingathering. Lubavitcher Rebbe, my personal mentor and one of the foremost leaders of world Judaism, actually, whose picture is behind me if I move my head, he said that what could be accomplished through joy is more than could be accomplished through all the tears and praying of the high holidays. The festival of the ingathering is trying to take a moment. Now, it's a much less pressure holiday. You're sitting in a booth, you're having a l'chaim, a drink or two. For those of you who are over 21, I am not in any way encouraging underage drinking. And you celebrate with your friends. We do every year a pumpkin spice night in the sukkah, because I'm a big believer in pumpkin spice. If any of you have a dislike for pumpkin spice, it's rooted in misogyny. I'll be happy to explain it at the end of the class. But I'm a big lover of pumpkin spice, and my coffee isn't yet, I'm not yet there in my season. And we have fun nights. We have shakes in the shack and pizza in the hut and all various fun themed ideas because it's the festival of joy. And what you're supposed to do is take a minute to breathe. I had an incredible experience this Yom Kippur. As I said, I'm the only one who has to work on Jewish holidays. We had a 600 square foot sanctuary that I built outdoors with open air and social distance seating and measuring each chair to make sure it's 6 feet apart from the next one and putting out masks and all sorts of things that I had to do. And then I had to lead a service, which This is going to shock you, but I don't have the most beautiful singing voice. So leading this service, which has a lot of high notes, is particularly difficult for me. And I was running, getting ready, and I was a little stressed going into the service. I felt that I rushed a joke in my speech a little too much. And then halfway through the service, my wife, who was incredible, explained one of the prayers. And I did something amazing. I took a breath, which I'm pretty sure I hadn't done in the 6 weeks before that moment. And after that, the service went fine because I had nothing to do. We were in the middle of the service already. I couldn't set anything up. Someone else was talking. I didn't have to be saying any prayers. I just took a breath. And that's one of the messages of Sukkot. Sit down in a booth. Acknowledge that God has this. God's in. He has your back. Gather together, either virtually or in person, with your friends. And take a breath. Recognize that a new year has started. Unpack a little bit all you gained over the last few days. Ingather. You're no longer working in the field. You no longer have to plant or water or check on the crops, etc. Gather in the plants and take a minute. If you've ever been to a farm in Kentucky, when they're gathering the plants, they let them sit in the sun. There's various benefits to that. Let them dry a little bit. If you store crops when they're wet, they mold almost immediately. So for example, tobacco, they let dry for a lot longer than they would the corn, but most things get cut down and then sit in the sun for a little bit. While it's no longer attached to the ground, we just relax. And that's the message, one of the messages of Sukkot, that it's the ingathering. Sit back, relax, take a breath. Believe me, God has it under control. There's all sorts of terrible things going on in the world. There's a near Holocaust happening in China. There's world wars, there's wars happening in Eastern Europe. There's corona all over the place. God's on this. And there's not that much that one of us can do to solve all of this. So ingather, go over the last month. Now again, this doesn't mean rest forever. It doesn't mean you're done. The Bible says 6 days you shall work and the seventh you shall rest. A lot of people are very big on the day of rest. They're not so big on the 6 days of working to improve the world that comes before that day of rest. The Bible specifically says 6 days you shall do all your work and on the seventh you shall rest. So it doesn't mean that I'm not going to start working the second Sabbath is over. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue pushing myself and trying to gain and trying to change the world after Sukkot. But ingather. If you're planting and planting and planting, you don't benefit from those plants. At a certain point, you need to gather. You need to look back at where you are. Any good mountain climber will tell you that the idea never look down is not a thing. Don't look down when you're on a slope. When you get to a plateau, look down. Look at your accomplishment. Acknowledge where you are on the mountain. We've all got a climb we've got going. I'm not going to quote Miley Cyrus here, but we've all got a mountain to climb. And it's important at times to take a breath. And that's one of the key messages of Sukkot, after the most turbocharged busy month in Judaism, to just have a pumpkin spice coffee, call mom, ask how she's doing. Okay, maybe that's a little stressful. But take a minute for yourself and acknowledge a moment that is needed. So yes, that the concept of Shavuos, and by the way, it's much more so when you compare it to the other 2 days. On Shavuos, the holiday when we celebrate the gathering of the receiving of the Torah, the first night of Shavuos, Jews stay up the entire night till sunrise studying. It says that the Jews overslept when Moses came down the mountain with the tablets. So to make up for that, to make sure we don't oversleep, Jews all over the world stay up all night studying. It's focused on studying. Passover is focused on the Exodus from Egypt. The message of all the Torah, of all the Jewish scripture, is timely. You're supposed to live with it every day. And the message is that we have our personal Egypts. You might know someone whose Egypt is drugs. You might know someone whose Egypt is another form of addiction. The idea, and you might know someone whose Egypt is depression, is getting too caught up in little details and not recognizing the big picture. So Passover is a much more active. It's let's change. Let's take the step forward. Let's take a step towards actual freedom, not just freedom from outside sources, but freedom of our minds. while Sukkot is much more God's got this, let's take a breath. Now, Sukkot ends in a holiday called Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah. The last day of the holiday, we begin reading the scripture anew. So in Jewish communities all across the world, every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, they read a portion from the Torah. Now, actually, chapter and verse, which is how almost everyone today talks about scripture, was invented in the original Greek translation. So in the original Hebrew, there was no chapter or verse. There were no periods. You had to memorize where the periods were. They're called seif pasuks, and when you read it, you pause. That's how we know where the periods are. So the idea of chapter and verse wasn't there. It was split up rather into portions. So the first portion is Genesis. The second portion is Noah. The third portion is Go for Yourself, as the name of the portion is. God telling Abraham to leave his father's house. So the original breakup was into portions, and the portions work out perfectly that if you read one a week, every week of the year, you conclude every year at the end of Sukkot on Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah literally means the joy of the scripture. And God's description of this holiday, he says, Kashalai pidaschem. It's hard for me when you separate. So it's a weird, it gets compared often to a father sending their child away, and he says, it's hard for me when you leave, so stay one more day. That doesn't really make any sense. What does it help to stay one more day? I really like my vacation to Florida, so I'm going to stay one more day. I still go back home the next day. So you pushed off leaving a day. What's the goal there? And the Lubavitcher Rebbe explained, if you look at the actual phrasing of the words, Kashalai pidaschem, it's harder for me when you separate. The correct linguistic word would be we. It's hard for me when we separate. So the Rebbe explained that, of course, no one can separate from God. But after Sukkot, there's often a time where we separate, where when God says you, the collective people separate, where we lose this specialness of the holiday, this unity, this joy that it brings. So the last day, we have one more day of celebration as we relaunch the studying of Scripture. Now, it's very interesting. Generally, the way Scripture is used, if anyone's seen a Torah scroll before, it's a leather scroll taken from a kosher animal that was slaughtered without pain. It's written out with ink and a feather. There's over 300,000 words, 300,000 letters that need to be written out in indigo black ink with a feather. It's a painstaking, nearly 3-year process. The average Torah scroll goes for about $60,000 to $80,000 because it takes an artist 3 years to finish it. Yeah, don't take mine. And generally the way it's celebrated is by opening it, is by reading it, is by sharing it with each other. Except on Simchat Torah. Simchat Torah, we don't take the cover off the Torah scroll. Rather, we pass it from hand to hand and we dance with it even. But we dance with the scroll closed. When the scroll is open, there's all sorts of different levels. If we would open a book about agriculture, I'm sure there's someone in this room that would know a lot more about it than someone else in this room. If we open a book about history, I'm sure there's someone in this Zoom room that would know a lot more about it than someone else in this Zoom room. I don't know if Zoom room is a word. If it isn't, I coined it, tell Webster. However, when a book is closed, someone recently gave me a book that was very useful because my wife bought a table she loves that was a little crooked. So I just put it underneath one of the legs. When a book is closed, we can all use it for the same thing. My mom tells a story that she was visiting her mother, and her mother asked her if she picked up a paper on the corner. And my mother's told her, here's an iPad. Anything you need the paper for, you can use an iPad for. So she used it to whack a bug on the wall. So when a book is closed, it's the same thing to all of us. No one's better than someone else with a closed book. So as we celebrate with the scroll, we specifically don't open it. It's not about who's the most learned, who's the most pious, etc. God just says, I want to see you together. I want to see you unified. I want to see you full of joy. And so we conclude Sukkot with, and I have no idea, all the other services of the year, I have found a way to make them work in COVID-19. I built a 600-foot sanctuary. I'm building a sukkah twice the size. Passover, I made Passover in a box for people to take home. The holiday where you're supposed to dance together in joy, I haven't quite figured it out. I'm thinking maybe to do like a silent rave with headphones and everyone dance by themselves. I haven't quite figured out how that looks. But the final celebration is celebrate together. It's not about investing in getting stronger together, or getting more pious together, getting farther, building ourselves together, which are all great things. The conclusion of Sukkot is let's celebrate together, let's dance together, let's acknowledge together we have this communal joy in the fact that we're co-religious, and the fact that we're one people, and the fact that we're one commonwealth. And that joy takes everything from the entire month, all the spirituality, all the holiness, all the prayer, all the intent for the coming year, and lets us expand with good. And ideally, when you leave as one. I went to a concert in Michigan. My best friend lives in Michigan, so I went up to surprise him with a concert. And it started to pour as the concert ended. And we're in the parking lot. It's about 900 cars. And a mudslide, someone was probably drinking, and hit the side of a hill coming out of the parking lot and caused a little mudslide onto the road so cars couldn't go. So you have 900 cars, with many of them with several people in it. No one can leave the parking lot, and I'm sure everyone has somewhere to go. And I guarantee you, if we were leaving Kroger, or if we were leaving a class, or if we were leaving almost anything in the world, you'd have some extremely irate people. It's pouring rain, people just want to get home. However, hopefully besides the drivers, most people there had had a drink or two, and everyone was just coming from an awesome concert. So a couple people who were braver cranked the volume up in their cars, and there were people dancing on their cars in the rain and running from car to car, talking to people. And it was one of the coolest experiences of my life. Everyone was on the same energy level. Everyone was on a high. Everyone was excited. And that's the attitude that we're going for as we conclude Sukkot. Let's all dance together. Let's all celebrate together. And then when we see each other afterwards, there's still that shared connection. It's hard to say, oh, I know you. We once prayed together. I know you. We once made New Year's resolutions together. As opposed to, hey, you remember that night in Vegas? Oh, yeah, sure, Jimmy. I know Jimmy. That unity, the unity of joy, is one that doesn't go away when the holiday is over. God willing, intentionally it doesn't go away, and it's something that continues into the year. And that is Sukkot in a nutshell.
Well, that is super fascinating. Thank you so much for kind of giving us some more insight about the history or just the whole reality of the holiday. But so question for you, as busy professionals just fill their lives with more and more things. Here you are being super intentional, literally building an outdoor structure to slow down. What advice do you have for people who have yet to be able to have the discipline of just saying, okay, full stop, I need to stop?
So there's a expression there's a Jewish saying of questionable backing. I don't know if anyone saw something that was all over Twitter after Justice Ginsburg passed away last week. There's a Jewish tradition that if you pass away on Jewish New Year's, it means you're a righteous person. That's made up. It's not written anywhere. Nothing to take away from Justice Ginsburg, just that line doesn't appear anywhere in Jewish tradition. Someone just made it up on Twitter. Other people thought it was good. And the vice president shared it. All kinds of people shared it. It was totally made up. So this concept actually is often attributed to the Talmud, but actually comes from a writer in the 1800s. He writes, as much as Jews have kept the Sabbath, Sabbath has kept the Jews. Meaning, as much dedication and expression Jews have put in to this idea of taking one day off, it's done that much benefit and more for the Jewish people. There's something tremendous to taking a day off. My first job at a rabbinical school was running kosher for Kroger's in the state of Kentucky. And I had a boss who was quite anti-Semitic. And he would find different things to harp on. And one day he realized that I'm the only employee that's never worked on Saturday. And the obvious reason for that is, as a rabbi, I'm in synagogue all Sabbath. I can't drive a car. I can't walk in electronic doors. I can't sign in at work. There'd be many issues with me, and you can't work. So there's many issues with me coming in on a Saturday. And he said, I put you on call for this Saturday if we need another manager. I said, excellent. I'm glad you have me on call. And I turned on my phone Saturday night, and I had 9 missed calls. So I came in Sunday. He said, you didn't answer my calls when I called. I said, I know, it's my Sabbath. I told you you can put me on call, but you're aware of who I am and how I work. I can't answer the call, and I certainly can't come in. So The first step, I think, to this, what Sukkot does for the year, is what Sabbath does for the week. And there's various influential people who have taken on Sabbath, who talk about it. And there's inventions which try to create Sabbath. The idea of having a conference that doesn't have phone reception. The biggest blessing of Sabbath is that this gets turned off. I run 4 different organizations. I probably get 1,000 emails a day, and half that in texts or WhatsApps or calls. It might come in, it might not. My office might burn down on a Saturday morning. I wouldn't know about it till that night. And there's a beauty to that. As was mentioned several times, I have 5 young children, 3 4-year-olds, a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. I sit and play with them. And I don't know what job I have to do. There's a term which has been co-opted to mean one specific thing, Netflix and chill. I think it's an incredibly powerful term. You don't even need the Netflix, but take an hour a week with a friend. Choose a television show. Choose a board game you both like. And the most important thing, go in a basement, turn your phones off. I guarantee you whatever Trump did this morning can wait another day. I guarantee you your best friend's issue with that guy from 6 months ago can wait another day. There are very, very few things that can't wait an hour. And you have to be intentional about this. It does require intentionality. And so what I think is key is choosing a time. So as I mentioned, we have Sukkot, which is a specific 8-day holiday. You have Sabbath, which is a specific day, 1 day a week. Now I know 6 months from now, if someone says, hey, I have a conference going on Saturday, the 15th of April, I said, I'm busy then. I know now, what am I doing? I'm doing nothing. I'm looking back at the last week and looking forward to the next week. I'm celebrating with my God, I'm celebrating with my wife, I'm celebrating with my children. And your time could be Tuesdays at 2 p.m. to 2:30. But the idea is, if someone says, hey, there's this lecture I want to go to, it's on Tuesday. No, I'm busy Tuesdays at 2 to 2:30. No different than I couldn't cancel this appointment, I couldn't cancel a class, I have to be there. You should choose a time for you that you have to be there. Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was the leader of the largest Jewish nation in the world, would spend an hour a day, every day, having tea with his wife. And his doctors, he had a heart attack in his 80s while he was still the director of the largest Jewish nation in the world, working about 20-hour days. And his doctor was looking at things on his schedule that he can cut out. And he said, you every day, leave your office, go home, spend an hour at home, go back to your office. If you take that chunk out of your day and just spend an hour with your wife, in the evening, when you get home, then you could save a lot of hassle, reorganize your day, and have less stress on yourself. And the rabbi said, I'd rather you cut out of my schedule my morning prayers. You can imagine how important morning prayers are to a rabbi. He said, to take away the hour that I spend with my wife every day, I'd rather you take away my morning prayers. Now, of course, he wasn't canceling morning prayers from his schedule. But that idea that if I have a set time with someone, I keep that set time. That is crucial to me. The Rebbe, till the day his mother passed away, visited his mother every single day. Until his wife passed away, spent an hour with his wife having tea, accomplishing nothing, not planning for the future, not discussing what groceries the house needed, sitting and enjoying her company, talking to her about their lives. And it's something that I try to incorporate. I don't succeed as well. But my father is the dean of the only Jewish school in Kentucky. He's the chief rabbi. He has all sorts of responsibilities. I remember a handful of dinners in my entire childhood that my father wasn't at, that my mother wasn't at, because they chose that hour to be their family hour, to be their relaxation hour. And my father only had a phone when I turned like 15. It was the original Nokia. It had Snake, and you can run it over with a car and nothing happened to it. But the fact is that phone was off. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember hanging up on telemarketers because they called during dinner. I know Rob can, no offense guessing your age there, Rob, but I don't know how many students can appreciate what that used to be. A cell phone was invented for one reason. A cell phone was invented so I could reach you wherever I am. I had a minor miracle happen in my life today. I was driving my kids to school. I drive my kids 75 miles to school every morning. So I was driving my kids to school, and I noticed I was running out of gas, and I couldn't find my wallet this morning. And I realized that I'm running out of gas on a 64 and I don't have any money on me. And I look around the car and a miracle happened. I found my wallet, which I was looking for the whole morning. I had left it in the car. So it was a minor miracle in my life. And I was able to buy gas. But that concept that if I was stuck, I have a cell phone. I can call for help. A cell phone was not invented so that wherever I am, someone can call me. It wasn't invented so someone get a hold of me when I'm busy. It was invented I can get a hold of others. And somehow, phones have become an almost leash that wherever I am, I'm connected to work. Oh, it's no problem. I'll reach out to him on his cell. I know he's on vacation. He's not in the office. Or I know it's not class right now, but it's no problem. I can reach them. I don't believe that was the original intention of cell phones, and I think it's a misconception that many of us have. There should be no issue. There should be no shame in telling someone, no, my phone was turned off. Why? No reason. I turned my phone off. So the answer in short is it takes intentionality. It doesn't have to start with a day or a week-long holiday. It can start with a half hour. But what it takes is intentionality.
I greatly appreciate the freedom of that, the idea of even if it's just a half hour, kind of starting and being very intentional. And just that powerful line of there's just no shame in turning that off, and how countercultural that is in really kind of the cultural spirituality of busyness and how that deems you important. Today you've given us just a lot to think about. I really appreciate this. Are there any other questions before we wrap up here? Anybody from the Zoom room? We're going to trademark that now. Well, I think you've given us...
I'll conclude quickly with one story. If any of you know now, this will really tell you how old you are. If any of you know who Sean Combs is, or Puff Daddy, or P. Diddy, or whichever other name he's going by now, like you can really tell what decade someone's from by what they think this gentleman's name is. He once called up his lawyer, Ben Brafman, who's one of the major lawyers in Manhattan, is an Orthodox Jew, after Sabbath, and said, I'm sending you a check. And he sent him a check for 80 grand out of the blue. So Ben said, what's this about? And he said, I had a friend over, another very wealthy musician, and I was telling him about you. And he said, your Sabbath thing is a joke. And I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call my lawyer's cell phone right now 10 times. Okay, I'm his top client. I give him millions of dollars of business every year. I'm going to call his cell. It's an emergency, 10 times. If he answers any one of those times, I'll give you $800,000. And Sean Combs called his lawyer, and his lawyer didn't answer because it was the Sabbath. It doesn't matter if it's my top client. There are other lawyers. He'll take care of it. If I lose the client, I lose the client, but this is my day with my family and God. And he said that I made 800 grand, so I figured you deserve 10%. But that he was so confident that that's what his lawyer's reaction would be, that he wasn't going to answer the phone. So yeah, take some time. And in general, if anyone has a question, Rob has my email. I'm always happy to answer questions. We can do a Zoom, etc. But thank you for having me here today. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Just so fantastic. May these holidays be wonderful for you, your family, your 3-4-year-olds, and the people that you support and journey with. And I guess I will close today with the words of Puff Daddy. We'll be missing you. I'll be missing you, I guess. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day. We'll be in contact. Bye.